So hi, Fabrice. Thank you for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you in this podcast. So I'm Caroline Hoffmann. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at Owkin. I'm an MD and PhD by training. I was a head and neck cancer surgeon doing a lot of translational research and research on the tumor microenvironment. I joined Owkin 4 years ago to really see how AI can accelerate research and try to have a bigger impact in the future for our patients. And I'm really excited to have you here today. And so can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Fabrice Andre. So I am medical oncologist working at Institut Gustave Roussy, where I am also the Chief Scientific Officer of Gustave Roussy. So research department at Gustave Roussy includes around 1,500 people working in many areas. And we have one center fully dedicated to research on artificial intelligence and oncology.
Amazing. So you've been at the forefront of oncology for so many years, both in research, translational research, on the clinical practice. So I'd love to hear about your perspective in the field. So what has changed in the last 10 years and how you see things going forward?
So there are some good changes and some problems also that came recently. So positive things. First, new treatment. So we have now multiple new treatment, and basically we have two different set of new therapies. First one are highly bioactive targeted therapy. So these are new generation of targeted therapy that are more active on the protein and far more effective. Second, we have all this wave of therapy coming from what we call biotechnologies. So now engineers in biotechnologies can recreate highly effective drugs from protein or from cells. So that are two very important advances in the field of therapeutics. Then we have many other advances. First, in the field of diagnosis, because if we don't have the right diagnosis, precise diagnosis, therapy cannot do anything. So more and more we see implementation of multi-gene sequencing, more effective pathology workflow, diagnosing infrastructure. This is very important to improve the outcome of patients, especially in low and middle income countries. Then we have a totally new field that is coming, is the capacity for the early cancer detection. And we all know the earlier a cancer is diagnosed, and the best are the outcome. Best example recently is the use of CT scan for the screening of patients with lung cancer. We have many other examples. Here is really about technology. What are the new technologies that allow early cancer detection? And we are all waiting for the further development of blood tests for early cancer detection. So these are, I would say, good news that could lead to around 60% survival after a cancer. On the side of the bad news, we still have very hard to treat cancer that are resistant to many therapies, and I will not go into detail. And then we have two problems. One is because we have all this wave and breadth of therapy and diagnosis, it's becoming difficult to the conventional infrastructure of care to take care of the patient. In the past, to treat one patient, we needed to use few resources. Now we need large number of nurses, large number of doctors, complex infrastructure, complex hospitalization. So here there is a need to address this problem. Otherwise, we will not be able to treat all the patients with all the therapies that are coming. So this is a major point, infrastructure and capacity. The second evolution we are seeing, that is a problem, it's something we need to solve, is because again, we have so many treatments, so many diagnostic tests, it's difficult for a single doctor to make the right decision because a single doctor cannot digest all the literature, all the clinical trials. And this leads to 2 points. How can we help the doctor to make decision? And second, based on which background data the doctor is going to take the decision in the future.
This is amazing. And so what kind of solutions would you see there? I mean, when I hear that you see it's really hard to ingest all this literature, all the latest results, and to be absolutely up to date, and also even just for your own patient, like having in mind the whole history and all the comorbidities and the previous side effect of a drug, etc. This is very complicated. So obviously, this is where we would think as anyone about AI helping us. Do you see this as a possibility going forward, like an assistant AI that would help to handle all this?
Yeah, you're totally right. So here is the field of AI on one side, database on another side. So AI, and how can we use AI to assist the medical decision? First step is to digest all the information in the medical file. I mean, we all know sometimes some patients have a long history of disease, complex intervention. Simplification of the medical file is absolutely crucial to make the right decision. It's something in general hidden. Nobody talks about that, but sometimes patients have a file extremely big, difficult to read, and we are losing some detail, missing some detail that are very important. Here we need tools to digest medical file, make it simple. Then we need AI assistant to being able to digest, source and digest and compile, prioritize all the evidence and data that relate to the case of the patient we want to treat. So obviously, it's a major field of development for AI. Nevertheless, we have to keep in mind that having an assistant helping the doctor, this is a medical device. So this has to be validated with the same methodology than any other intervention that can be a drug or a device like a radiation therapy or a new diagnostic test. We cannot implement AI assistant, AI agent for medical decision without a formal clinical trial showing the benefit of having this kind of assistant and which one we are going to use, because maybe in the future there will be hundreds of them. So we have to select only the one that have shown some medical utility. Then the second topic is the use of patient similarities to make decisions. So more and more and more, because each patient is unique, we will have to see in very large database that include maybe millions of patients, how similar patients were treated and what was the outcome. And more, we will make decisions in part with this information. There are already some existing tools, but in the future, it's very likely that part of the decision will be based on analysis of what we call similar patient in database, and the other part of the decision will be based on what we are doing now, meaning randomized trials and these things.
And about this, do you have a personal example that gives you hope that it's gonna work? Maybe, I don't know, around the digital twins. Have you already seen in your personal experience a case where you could, remember, oh, I already saw that patient, that's a similar case, this worked or this didn't work, I think I'm gonna apply it. Like where are your hints coming from that support your hopes in AI assistant?
Well, if you look, for example, in colleagues from Cambridge, they have developed a tool that is called Predict UK, where we can already, enter the characteristics of the patient and extract some important information, outcome, benefit of each therapy. So there are already some examples where we can extract information that could be useful to share with the patient and also to make a decision that are already existing.
Yeah, I see. And in this example of digital twins, if it sends you to like similar files, I guess you can read these files. You can actually see that it's real patient. You can check for yourself that it's consistent. And so it helps, let's say, to trust and for the validation. Is that something you would see, or are you fearing that, people will go wild with AI and believe the results and maybe not check enough, or, how would you see the validation?
I think for me, so again, if we separate AI versus what I would call patient similarities, patient similar digital twin. For me, digital twins are very large database where you can find maybe the 10 or 100 or 1,000 that share exactly the same characteristics of the patient, and you can analyze their outcome. Again, as we were discussing before for AI agent for decision, for me, these digital twins should be considered as a medical device.
As well, okay.
And they have to be evaluated in the context of clinical trial. For example, if I use this database Y, whether I'm going to improve the quality of decision and potentially the outcome of patient.
Yeah.
I think there is no advance in the medical field, from my perspective, without careful evaluation and validation by clinical trials, even if the hypothesis of the trial is not a therapeutic intervention or a new drug.
Super interesting. Talking now about clinical trials, you already see AI playing a role somewhere in clinical trials in the current routine, let's say in the design of trials, indication optimization, or other topics, or and also like how do you foresee the evolution of a clinical trial in the coming years in this regard?
I think we see, we are trying to use AI in 3 directions that are very different. The first is to conduct the clinical trial. So, for example, we are working with some companies about how to capture data in the medical file and how to structure data thanks to artificial intelligence. So this is how we use AI to conduct and to run the trial. For example, also on when we do screening of patients, we can use AI. So there are many ways we can use artificial intelligence for the conduct, the operational part of the trial. Then there is a second pillar that is the use of artificial intelligence to design the trial and to invent the question. And we come back here to the use of AI agents to support and help the investigator. On this, I will be careful because we have to use AI agent in this context only with validated tool, because I've seen some colleagues overusing AI to help them designing clinical trials. So this is something important. And then the last pillar in terms of clinical research is using AI through digital twin to minimize the need for control arm. For example, if there is a rare condition, we have a new drug, well, we want to test if this new drug is effective, but usually we want to minimize the number of patients in the placebo control arm. So here, maybe with AI, we are going to create a synthetic control arm that could be useful to accelerate drug development and also making it, I would say, a little bit more ethical by avoiding giving placebo or standard of care of patient when we know that we have outstanding drugs.
And already today, are some of these improvements in clinical trials using AI already implemented?
Well, today, so this is an important question. Probably there are some few things that are implemented, especially in the design, but implementation in clinical trials require longer time because a clinical trial is what defines the evidence that is going to impact sometimes millions of patients. So, and this is something interesting with AI. AI has a very big growth, big development at the tech level. At the same time, we have to accept that to implement this field in something so important as clinical research, we need to take a little bit of time and validate its utility at each step of the process. Example, we know that data capture and structure by AI has good performance, but nevertheless, we need, little bit more experience. We need to learn when artificial intelligence failed, for example. We need to learn a lot of things before we fully rely on data acquisition by AI, because the impact of being wrong will be too important,
Mm-hmm. Of course. Moving to the topic of research. So what are your thoughts on AI scientists for research and how we can automatize discoveries from the more simple use, let's say classical frameworks and co-scientist assistant, to something more autonomous that will actually do deductions and really be creative in the field of biology and life science?
I think this question rely and refers to basically what makes a discovery. So to make a discovery, you need several steps and flow. At the beginning, you need the method to analyze the data. So in this, AI, assistant AI, agent AI can be helpful for pipeline, foundation model. I would say this is the ground. Then there are what we call the rules or the framework. So for example, if we want to discover a new target for an antibody drug conjugate, the prior knowledge has reason few characteristics that one target should have. And here the AI can help creating this framework and can help based on the scientific question, to extract some new target, new information based on this framework. For example, if you tell an AI assistant or give me the protein to present these 4 characteristics, the AI is going to tell us. But still, the AI is telling you something that you could maybe find in the literature if you were spending 1 month doing literature review. So here we are where we use AI, I would say, to save a lot of time. Okay, so we have AI for the foundation, meaning pipeline, being able to analyze. We have AI that is going to save time by digesting very quickly all the literature, the data, and making some prioritization. Then, can we have an AI who can invent and create something that cannot be predicted by the literature? I think on this, there are probably some methodological work to do to know precisely what is the discovery. So we're discussing inductive research, meaning research extracted from the observation, deductive research, that is the consequence of thinking. So these 2 types of discovery are totally different. They probably need 2 different methodological development to be done by AI assistants. So there are already some things. Probably there are already some discoveries done by AI. I think we still need a little bit more work by connecting colleagues who are working on the artificial intelligence and colleagues working on epistemology, who have already analyzed what makes a discovery and what is a discovery and what are the characteristics of a scientific discovery. We need a convergence between these 2 fields.
And have you been able to test it yourself? Do you have programs ongoing for such autonomous research?
No, myself, so far, I use AI mostly as an assistant to accelerate research literature or capturing, all the information everywhere. Sometimes I use it, as we're discussing, as a first level data scientist, asking, what is the prevalence of a target that will have this characteristics. So I really use it as an assistant. So far, I cannot say that I have generated the discovery by AI, but probably because I'm not maybe good at making prompts, or because I did not have the right one in hands.
I see.
Already, I would like to make a discovery by myself, if possible, and then I will see with AI.
With these AI assistants, let's admit that they can make discoveries and suggest good ideas. So let's imagine an AI assistant provides instructions saying, okay, maybe this patient, given what I see in the clinical file and all I know about its molecular data, I would suggest using this and this treatment together. We can imagine that it will suggest probably the standard of care. It should suggest as well clinical trials that are adapted for this patient. But maybe it can also suggest novel ideas based on biology and actual reasoning. And so what are your thoughts on such system, and how would you see the validation of these?
I think for me, this is exactly what we call clinical decision supporting system, meaning an AI agent is going to support the clinician to make a decision. Then what are the characteristics to make this decision, whether they are clinical or demographic or imaging or biology, whatever the complexity of biology. At the end, it's all about, one, what are the characteristics of this patient where there is knowledge about a drug and how to prioritize it. Second, can I model the disease? Meaning, can I understand the molecular basis of the disease to make a decision and understand at the level of the patient what could be the issue in terms of toxicity or so I think for me this is an assistant, but it's a device, and again I think this kind of device must be assessed in the context of clinical trial. At the end I think even the best device at the technological level, we need to assess what is its utility, because there is a gap between tech development and utility and impact for patient, and we need to use clinical research to fill this gap. And in the last 10 years we have seen a lot of companies in biotechnology for diagnosis. The ones who have been successful at the end were always the one who invested on generating the evidence based on clinical trial, not always the one who had the best technology at the beginning. So I think this is a very important message also in this field of assisting the doctor to make a decision with a device.
And before the clinical validation, if we're thinking of in vitro validation, how would you see the place of, let's say, the most patient-grounded models that we have now, such as patient-derived organoids or direct testing on cells that are directly coming from patient? Do you see this as coming into play in the upcoming years?
Yeah, so this is what we call ex vivo living model, meaning these models are living, they are outside the patient. So these are cancer cells, but also the microenvironment of the cancer cell, where we try either to test drugs or to model, to recapitulate the biology at the level of each single patient. So these devices are now being developed. Some of them have been tested in clinical research. Most of the clinical trials that have been done so far test the feasibility of this approach, not so much the efficacy. Some are starting now to test the efficacy. One of the difficulty here will be to have all the panel of drugs available. It's always the issue in precision medicine. Testing is one thing, but also you need to have access to all the portfolio of drugs. And then one of the limits of this approach, but we need to focus on the potential benefit, not anticipating the limit, but it's true that one of the limits is that so far with this ex vivo living model, it's difficult to predict what will be the secondary mechanism of resistance. Because usually there are some subclone or tumor evolution or things that are very subtle and that so far cannot be assessed at the level of an organoid, for example.
Thanks a lot for all these insights. And Fabrice, how would you see the hospital of the future in 5-10 years and its AI enablement?
So as we were discussing at the beginning, one of the major issues we are seeing now is the complexity of the pathway of care, because we are using a lot of drugs, a lot of diagnostic tests, a lot of different modalities at different time points. So it's becoming extremely complex for a single patient. So there is a need to simplify what we call the pathway of care and the infrastructure. So this is done through two different ways. The first one are making clinical trials, testing that we can treat patients very well with lower amount of resources. Example, do we need 2 years of immunotherapeutics or 6 months, etc., etc. So if we can decrease the amount of treatment, automatically the pathway of care becomes more simple. Then the second pillar on this optimization of pathway of care are the use of AI and digital tools. For example, things are very simple, but you can monitor the patient at home with digital tools. And maybe you don't need the patient always to come to the hospital for visit. Sometimes it can be done with a digital tool. You can better organize all the infrastructure thanks to AI, because for example, when this patient has these characteristics, automatically this drugs is going to be produced. You can better know any simple things, where are the syringe, where are the perfusion, etc., inside the infrastructure. So at any level, you can make things more effective because of AI and digitalization of the infrastructure.
And do you see that tomorrow we will design patient-specific drugs like as a routine thing?
I think there are already some tests to personalize drugs a little bit. But today, not so much the drug itself, but more the formulation. Are we using IV or orally, etc.? So the development of a drug per patient is something that maybe in the future can be done, but only for patients who have experienced multiple steps of resistance. So it's very unusual that one patient has a very unique feature at baseline. Usually, patients become unique after several years of resistance to therapy because they have accumulated multiple molecular alterations, and this multiplicity makes the patient unique. In this case, we could potentially imagine that we could create one drug for this patient, but this requires to follow the step of the regulatory agency. So probably it needs maybe 2 years before having a drug for a patient. So we can envision a pathway of care where this is feasible. I would say at this stage, we can say it's something like a vision. It's not impossible, but there is some bottleneck, especially at the regulatory level, to be sure that we follow all the steps necessary for the safety of the patient. But theoretically, it's something feasible. In some very rare condition, this is what gene therapy is doing. When you introduce one gene to make gene therapy in very, very rare condition, they are close to this point.
And you told us that one benefit you would see of AI is to actually simplify the framework. This is actually funny because usually we now say we need more data, we need more tests on each patient because we don't understand, and you are willing to simplify. So how does this reconcile?
So what we need is really to define, based on knowledge, what type of data do we need in each patient, to be sure this data is collected on a robust way and that we can collect it in as many patients as possible. Having very deep characterization of each cancer, where most of the dimensions are not known at the biological level, I think costs a lot of money, limit the number of patients, and we acquire knowledge. We acquire data for which there is no knowledge. And even AI cannot generate knowledge where there is absolutely nothing known. So I think for me, it's better to accumulate deep data in each patient, but not going too complex, because otherwise things become non-feasible.
Fabrice, thanks a lot for spending time with us and for this very insightful conversation. It's amazing to hear on your perspective all the hopes that we have for tomorrow, but also all the challenges that are ahead of us. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.